Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by putting a very specific image in your head.
Oh boy, I think I know where this is going.
You probably do. It's that public apology video. We see them constantly, right? You're scrolling, and suddenly there's an influencer sitting on the floor.
Wearing the mandatory gray hoodie.
Yes, the gray hoodie, looking totally exhausted, and they always start with that huge, heavy sigh.
The deep breath right before the whole I take full accountability speech. It's practically its own genre of performance art at this point.
Exactly. We all know the script. The whole goal is damage control. You humble yourself, you beg for forgiveness, and you just pray the internet moves on.
Right. It's purely strategic.
But today, for this deep dive, we are looking at a case where that exact strategy went so horribly wrong that it's actually hard to believe it's real. We aren't talking about a YouTuber apologizing for a bad tweet.
No, we are definitely not.
We are talking about a pastor, incredibly serious abuse allegations, and a live stream that, instead of clearing his name, basically handed the authorities the exact evidence they needed to come right back for him.
It is truly a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond the PR disaster, this is a genuinely dark story.
It really is.
We're looking at Pastor T.D.McNutt of the Transformation Empowerment Worship Center in West Palm Beach, Florida. And our source material today, which is primarily this excellent investigation by Justin Carter for TSR Investigates, along with some supplementary reports from radio station 103.9 WDKX, it paints a picture of a family dynamic that is terrifyingly volatile.
Right, and just a quick heads up for everyone listening to this deep dive. We are dealing with allegations of child abuse today, so it does get heavy.
Very heavy.
But the reason we're doing this deep dive isn't just about the crime itself, it's about the aftermath. It's about what happens when you try to use social media to completely rewrite reality, and then reality pushes back hard.
It's the collision of the legal system, which has very specific, sometimes frustrating loopholes, and the court of public opinion, which plays by entirely different rules.
Yeah, and in this case, Pastor McNutt managed to somehow escape one, only to completely trap himself in the other.
He really did.
So let's lay out the timeline for everyone, because the exact order of events is crucial to understanding why this whole thing blew up the way it did. This all kicks off publicly, at least, in December 2025.
Right. December 2025 is when the police officially get involved.
And that's when McNutt gets arrested.
Exactly. McNutt was arrested, and the charges were severe. We're talking cruelty toward a child and abuse without bodily harm.
Which are huge charges.
Massive.
Oh.
And usually, when we hear about these kinds of abuse cases in the news, the details are kept super vague to protect the victim.
Right, for obvious legal reasons.
But here, the police report that surfaced was incredibly specific. The victim in this case was McNutt's 16-year-old nephew, who was actually living in the pastor's home.
And I really want to pause on that living situation for a second, because you have to understand the context. This is a 16-year-old boy. He's completely dependent on his uncle for housing, for food, for everything.
Everything.
That power dynamic is the entire foundation of this story.
It absolutely is. When you are a minor living with a relative, and especially when that relative is a prominent figure of authority like a pastor, your ability to advocate for yourself is almost non-existent. You are entirely at their mercy.
Right. So the police arrive in December, and they don't just take a quick statement. They see the physical evidence. The report notes visible injuries on this teenager.
Yeah, the details are rough.
We're talking about documented bruises on his back, his buttocks, and his legs. This wasn't some kind of he said, she said situation about whether a physical altercation happened. The injuries were right there.
And that's exactly what makes the backstory in the report so chilling. The December arrest was just the breaking point. The report actually details a history of violence leading up to that.
Yeah, that November incident.
Right. Specifically, an incident from a month prior, in November 2025. The nephew reportedly suffered a busted lip and a bloody nose.
And this is the detail that really, truly stuck with me when I was reading through the TSR Investigates notes. You hear busted lip and bloody nose, and your mind might naturally imagine, I don't know, a fist fight.
Or a teenager acting out physically and an adult losing control in the scuffle.
Exactly. But the report specifies the trigger for the specific violence. It wasn't a fight. It was over dishes.
The dishes. The report states the nephew was smacked in the face because he didn't wash the dishes correctly.
I mean, let's really unpack that for a second. Not washing them correctly. We've all had that moment, right? Maybe a roommate leaves a spot on a fork, or your kid forgets to scrub a pan.
It's annoying. It's a standard household grievance.
Right, but to escalate from, hey, do this again, to a physical strike to the face that actually draws blood, That is a massive, terrifying leap.
It indicates a total and complete lack of emotional regulation on the part of the adult. But more than that, think about what it does to the environment. It creates this atmosphere of constant, high-stakes anxiety for the child.
Just totally walking on eggshells.
Exactly. Imagine living in a house where the penalty for leaving a streak on a glass is a punch in the face.
Yeah.
You are terrified every single second of the day.
It's the very definition of terror. And that fear isn't just an assumption we're making here on the deep dive. It's fully documented in the police report. And this is where the legal aspect of the story starts to get really tricky.
Because of what he said to the cops.
Right. The report mentions that the 16-year-old actually did not want those December injuries reported.
Which is a heartbreakingly common reaction in domestic abuse cases. The report explicitly says he feared that if he told anyone, he would be beaten again.
God, that's heavy.
Just think about the logic going on in that kid's head. The justice system is supposed to protect him, but in his mind, the system is just a trigger for more pain. Silence is his only survival strategy.
And he wasn't the only one in the house who knew what was going on either. The report brings up the boy's mother.
Allegedly, yes. The police report claims the mother was aware of the injuries. Now, we don't know the full extent of her involvement or what her own situation was within that family structure.
Right. We only have what the sources reported.
But the fact that the injuries were known and not stopped, it really speaks to a circle of silence built around this pastor.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. McNutt gets arrested in December. The photos of the bruises are taken. The police report is filed. In any logical world, you'd think, all right, this is where the trial happens, and he faces a jury.
Right, you'd assume the system takes over.
But that is not what happened at all. The charges against Pastor McNutt were dropped. They never stuck, as the source explicitly puts it.
And this is exactly the part that always frustrates people about the legal system. To get a conviction, especially for cruelty or abuse charges, you usually need the victim to actively testify.
You need them on the stand.
You need them to stand up in open court, point at their abuser, and say, he did this to me.
But we just established that this 16-year-old was absolutely terrified of being beaten again if he spoke up.
Precisely. It's the ultimate catch-22. The exact same fear that kept the abuse going is the fear that stops the prosecution in its tracks. The nephew declined to testify.
Wow.
And without that testimony, the prosecution likely felt they just couldn't prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, even with the photos of the bruises. So the case stalls out. The charges are dropped.
So legally speaking, McNutt wins. He walks away. The system spits him back out onto the street. He could have just gone back to his church, kept his head down, and thanked his lucky stars that the legal system has these kinds of loopholes.
That would have been the rational strategic move.
Mm-hmm.
A status quo victory. The charges are gone. Your record is effectively clean. If he just stays quiet, this whole story probably disappears into the archives of local police blotters and nobody ever talks about it again.
But he didn't stay quiet.
No, he did not.
And this is where the story pivots from a standard tragedy to something honestly bizarre. Pastor McNutt decides that having the charges dropped just isn't enough for him.
He wants total vindication.
Exactly. So he does what everyone seems to do these days when they want to control a narrative. He goes live on social media.
This live stream is the pivot point of the entire saga. He initiated a broadcast featuring himself and, unbelievably, his nephew.
The same nephew he was just accused of beating.
The very same one.
I watched the description of this video in the TSR Investigates report, and Uncomfortable doesn't even begin to cover it. It feels entirely hostage-like.
It really does.
You have the pastor, who is very clearly running the show, and you have this 16-year-old boy sitting there. And McNutt isn't there to say, hey, we're working through things as a family privately. He's there to rewrite history.
The narrative he pushed during that stream was incredibly aggressive. He claimed the nephew had spun things out of proportion. He completely framed himself as the victim of the situation.
Unbelievable.
He said the allegations caused a whole bunch of damage to his reputation.
The narcissism of that is just staggering to me.
Yeah.
You have a kid with documented bruises on his body, and the pastor is sitting there talking about his reputation score. You made me look bad.
And then he takes it a step further. He essentially orders the child to apologize to the public.
On camera.
On camera. He wants the boy to look into the lens and basically say, I lied. McNutt alleges right there on the stream that the 16-year-old fabricated the abuse entirely.
Just try to imagine the pressure in that room for a second. You're 16 years old. The man you live with, the exact same man you told the police you were terrified of, is holding a phone in your face, broadcasting to the entire world, telling you to fix his reputation.
It screams coercion. You asked earlier if there's any world where this is innocent, and the answer is, when you look at the power dynamics, absolutely not.
Right.
When a guardian forces a dependent minor to publicly recant serious abuse allegations that were literally supported by physical evidence like bruises, it doesn't look like family reconciliation. It looks like witness tampering happening in real time.
It's like he was trying to hold his own private court trial right there in his living room, where he gets to be the judge, the jury, and the lawyer, and the kid is just the defendant.
And the mother was somehow part of this narrative too, right?
Yeah.
The live stream apparently discussed her reaction as well, trying to present this united family front. It was a very coordinated effort to say, look, we are all fine, the legal system was wrong, and the boy is just a liar.
I just wonder if he really thought this would work. Like, did he legitimately think people would watch this video and go, oh, thank goodness Pastor McNutt is innocent. That kid really is just a troublemaker.
Honestly, I think he did. That's the hubris we were talking about earlier. He's a pastor. He's very used to standing up in front of a congregation and having people believe what he says simply because of who he is.
Right, he has that built-in authority.
Exactly. He likely thought his authority would translate perfectly through the screen. He thought he could just perform innocence and the internet would buy it.
But the internet is not a congregation, and the people watching this live stream, they definitely didn't buy it.
Not even a little bit. The backlash was immediate. Instead of clearing his name, the video acted as a massive, glaring red flag. People saw the body language, they heard the tone of his voice, they saw a terrified teenager reciting what looked like forced lines.
It backfired spectacularly. The report mentions that instead of exonerating him, it sparked massive backlash. But it wasn't just angry comments and emojis on a screen. This video actually reached the people who matter.
And this is the ultimate irony of the whole self-snitching phenomenon we see online. By trying so hard to control the narrative, McNutt inadvertently provided brand new evidence.
Because the dropped charges were about the past.
Right. The dropped charges were about a past event where there was no testimony. But this video, this was current. This was happening right now. It reportedly sparked renewed interest from Child Protective Services.
That is just, you almost have to laugh at the absolute absurdity of it if the underlying reality wasn't so incredibly sad. He was free. And then he literally handed CPS the evidence on a silver platter.
He really did. Investigators are trained to look for patterns. When they see a video like that, they don't see a wholesome family apology. They see emotional abuse. They see coercion.
Right.
They see a vulnerable child being exploited purely for the adult's benefit. It gave CPS a very clear, documented reason to reopen the file that the legal system had essentially closed.
And we actually have an update on the nephew, right? Because as we go through this deep dive, that's obviously the main concern here. Is he still stuck in that house, washing dishes and apologizing on camera?
Thankfully, no. According to the latest reports from Justin Carter's investigation, the boy has now been officially removed from the pastor's care.
Wow. So the live stream actually saved him in the end.
In a very twisted way, yes. If McNutt had just kept his mouth shut and stayed quiet, the boy might still be living in that house. The system had already failed to protect him because of the testimony issue.
Yeah, he slipped through the cracks.
But McNutt's absolute need to be publicly right, his need to humiliate the boy just to save face, that was the actual catalyst for the removal.
It's basically a modern morality play. His ego was his complete downfall. And I think we really have to give a huge shout out to the reporting here, too.
Oh, absolutely.
The Shade Room and TSR investigates for staying on this story. Because without that media spotlight, maybe CPS doesn't even see the video. Maybe it just stays locked inside the echo chamber of his loyal followers.
Investigative journalism, especially in the realm of social media reporting, plays such a huge watchdog role nowadays.
Yeah.
They contextualize that video for the public. They didn't just repost it for clicks.
Right, they did the work.
They investigated the timeline and connected the video back to the original December police report. They connected the dots between the forced apology and the documented bruises.
It really makes you think about the nature of truth online. We are so incredibly used to curated lives. We see these families on Instagram or TikTok and they look absolutely perfect. Or we see these apology videos and we just dissect them for entertainment value.
Right, it's just content to most people.
But in this case, the performance was hiding a very, very dangerous reality.
It actually brings up a really provocative thought for everyone listening to this right now.
Yeah.
We constantly talk about living in an era of digital surveillance right here.
We all know the feeling.
But usually, when we say that, we think of the government watching us. or corporations tracking our data, or even just neighbors with doorbell camera.
Yeah, external forces.
But in this deep dive, the surveillance was entirely self-imposed. McNutt surveilled himself. He actively broadcasted his own coercive, abusive behavior to the world because he genuinely thought it looked like strong leadership.
It's telling on yourself 101.
It is, and it really begs a much larger question. How many other apology videos or happy family updates have we all scrolled past that were actually evidence of something much darker?
Wow.
When we see a public figure dragging a spouse or a child onto a screen to quote-unquote clear the air, are we actually watching a conflict resolution, or are we literally watching a crime in progress?
That is a deeply chilling thought to end on. I know that the next time I see one of those forced apology videos, I'm definitely going to be looking at the eyes of the people in the background, not just listening to the person holding the microphone.
Skepticism is a vital survival skill in the digital age. You always have to ask yourself, who is holding the camera? And why are they choosing to film this right now?
And why are they trying so incredibly hard to convince me of their version of events? That's always the tell.
Exactly. The truth usually doesn't need a multi-platform PR campaign.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. It's a highly tragic story with a somewhat hopeful ending. At least the nephew is finally out of that toxic environment. But it stands as a massive lesson in hubris and the severe, unintended consequences of living your life online.
And a stark reminder that the most trivial things in a household like doing the dishes can sometimes be indicators of the most serious, deep-rooted problems.
Stay safe out there, everyone, and maybe just do your own dishes tonight. Don't make it a thing.
That's definitely good advice.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.